a lot of people seem to have this misconception that we're not experiencing hyperinflation as we speak right now. By the way, a lot of people look at the numbers and go, "Oh, it's only 2%. It's only 3%." Even the most pessimistic projections are that it's 8 or 9%. If you follow some of the alternative statistics, it's 8 or 9%. But even some people dismiss that as being no big deal. And many years ago, I came up with a way to visualize what would happen if something grew exponentially, which is what it is when something grows 8 or 9%. And I came up with this idea of a magic silver atom, and you have one atom of silver, except that it's magical. It can double itself. It reproduces once every day. So a day from now, you'll have 2 atoms of silver. 2 days from now, you'll have 4 atoms of silver, and so on and so forth. And I encourage you to pause this video to think about how long you would need to hold on to that magic atom of silver before you could maybe buy a house, before you could retire, before you could do a lot of wonderful things with it, right? I want you to pause this video and think about it. Is it a few months, a few years, maybe decades? Would you trade your 401k for a magic atom of silver and let it sit instead of keeping your money in your 401k? I'll let you think about this. Well, let's take a look. It takes you 73 days before you have a visible amount of silver, right? A silver dime. That's about the smallest amount of silver most people would think about when they talk about investing in silver, right? Okay, so it took 73 days to get to a silver dime. That's really slow. Maybe you shouldn't trade your 401k or your house for an atom of silver, right? Well, how long before you get to an ounce of silver? An ounce takes about quite a handful of dimes, right? So you would think it would take you several more months, right? 4 more days. You have that ounce of silver. Now think about it. It took you 2.5 months to get to that silver dime, and just 4 more days to get to that ounce of silver. Think about your prices in your everyday life, right? It took many years for the price of gas. See, when I started driving many years ago, gas was about $1.50. I'm not sure about where I live back home in Pittsburgh. It's probably a little bit less expensive than here in Seattle. The other day I paid about $2.80 a gallon. So it seems like it took almost 2 decades to not even double in price, right? Well, it took less than 2 months to go from an atom of silver to a silver dime, and just 4 days to upgrade that to an ounce. Right now, here's where things really start to go ballistic, in my opinion, because these are amounts that we can comprehend, right? And yet, it takes just a few more days to get to a 10-ounce silver bar, and then just a few more days to get to a 100-ounce silver bar, right? Day 84. And then a few more days later, we get to my favorite, the 1,000-ounce silver bar. I think this is the largest silver bar that anybody has ever made, really. I remember looking for a bigger one at one point, and probably because it probably dates back to the restrictions on gold and silver when Roosevelt was president. I think there must have been a 1,000-ounce limit of some sort for silver. I know the limit for gold was 5 ounces. That's probably why they don't make any bigger silver bars. Okay, 87 days. 87 days. And we're not quite at retirement money yet, right? Although some people will argue that one of these days you'll be able to retire off of one of these guys. We're not there yet, right? I think I read an article that historically about 500 ounces of silver will buy a house. So 87 days, and we get to 2 of those houses. So, what do you think? Is it going to be years before you can retire, or shorter? 5 more days. 5 more days from that, and you have a ton of silver. Day 92. 3 months ago, you had an atom of silver, and it took you 2.5 of those months just to get something even visible to the naked eye. And then 15 days later, you have a ton of silver. Think about that. Think about something that has taken a long time to double in price. For example, when we talked about the gas, think about silver prices, right? I remember as a kid, I used to like to look for Kennedy half dollars. They were 40% silver, and they had about 55 to 60 cents worth of silver. Hardly anybody wanted them. And I remember thinking, because at the time my dad, he had just lost a lot of money in the stock market during the dot-com bubble. And he and my mom would argue all the time. And I remember suggesting to my dad, he must have thought it was an April Fool's joke, but I suggested to my dad that he took whatever he had left and traded it for 40% silver half dollars, because they were selling for 55, 60 cents. And I thought, well, the most he could lose was 5 or 10 cents a coin, and there was so much upside potential, because at the time, this was in 2000 that we were talking about this. Only 20 years earlier, silver was $50 an ounce, and if you adjust that for inflation, no matter how you calculate it, right, even if it only went to 50 in year $2000, right, that's still a ton of upside compared to the downside that he was taking, right? But he thought it was a joke. And I was 12, 13 years old at the time, and he thought it was a joke. I mean, it was funny, and unfortunately, he regrets not listening to it now. So 3 months of doubling gets you from an atom of silver to a ton of silver. That's about as much as I can imagine ever having. But it gets even crazier after that. I'll let you think about what happens in another 92 days or so, right? Well, day 105, so 23 days later, right? Less than a month later, you have as much silver as the COMEX silver inventory, if we were to believe all that silver exists, right? It's never been audited. There's always a lot of theories about how they mislead the public. That's why there's usually a big gap between what the silver spot price is and what you can actually buy even one of these bars for, right? There's usually a gap, and if you want to buy any of these guys, right, there's always a big gap, right? Because all of these exist only on paper. You can short sell silver. Somebody else is buying your IOU of silver in that case, right? I'll let you read about how many ounces of silver one can actually buy from COMEX, right? It's going to be a lot more than 200 million ounces of silver, because you're also buying everybody else's IOUs of silver, right? I think there was a lawsuit one time. One of the big banks had gotten sued because they charged storage fees for silver that never existed, right? They basically charged a fee for storing their IOUs of silver, right? Well, that's day 105, and a little over a week after that of doubling, all of the silver ever mined in human history, right? 50 billion ounces of silver, right? I'll let you think about that. How long has silver been mined for? 5,000 years? It's been mined at an accelerated pace in recent years, obviously. Population has also exploded. In a similar scale like this, right? I'll let you do this thought experiment of, if, coronavirus were to wipe out everybody except for 2 people, how long it would take to repopulate the world, right? It's not going to be long. I would think so. As long as those 2 people don't have infertility issues or any other health problems like that, right? Well, day 166, 53 days, less than 2 months later, you have enough silver to make an Earth size of silver. Now, how many days was that? On day 91, we were talking about 87, we were talking about 1,000 ounces of silver, right? So much silver that most people can't lift it with one hand, right? And then in less than that amount of time, again, you have an Earth's worth of silver, right? I wonder what it would be like to walk on a planet made of solid silver. It would be twice as dense as the Earth, and twice the gravity, I'm not sure about twice the density, because the silver would probably compress itself. I wonder if it would turn into a star. Probably not, because at twice the density, you're not even at Jupiter yet, so in terms of the mass. Although the core might behave a little bit awkward, right? It might make a huge magnetic field, and then the radiation and all that. I'll let you guys think about what might happen if we had an Earth size of silver in an orbit that's similar to Earth. What kind of characteristics that planet might be. I wonder if that solid would stay solid, right? The silver. It might form an ocean of silver because of all the pressure underneath a crust, right? But there it is, right? So for 80 some number of days, there was almost no activity, right? Just like right now, for 80 some days, hardly anybody's getting sick, hardly anybody's experiencing inflation. We're going to be getting out checks soon for stimulus. There's a total of $2 to $6 trillion of checks. For a number of months, probably nobody's going to feel anything, and then kaboom. That's the nature of hyperinflation. If you go back to your history books and look at historical hyperinflation notes, I love to collect those. It's kind of funny because I'm collecting historical hyperinflation to protect myself against future hyperinflation, right? That's kind of what I'm doing when I invest in those historically. So I think I have some German 100,000 or million marks. But my favorite is the Mary Curry, the 20,000. Let me see if I can pull up a picture of that. So you might assume that, wow, one day we woke up and there were 20,000 Zoid bills and our money was worthless. That's not how it happened. Prices were doubling every week, and then maybe every 3 days, and then every 2 days. And people were getting paid frequently during the week at their jobs, and then they would instantly go out to buy. There's a economical term called the shoe leather cost. Because people wanted to avoid holding currency, they would go buy stuff, they would trade it for gold and silver, they'd have to walk places, and their shoes would wear out very fast, right? That's one of the costs of inflation. And it took a number of years before they went from a 10, 20 Zoid note to a 20,000, and then kaboom, right? And obviously the Cold War ended, and I believe they took every 10,000 and made it into a new Zoid. For a number of years, actually until very recently, you could take one of these to a bank and trade it for two of the modern Zoid, right? Although these have become very collectible. So it takes a long time before you get something that's noticeable, and then kaboom. That's what I want you to take away from this message. Thanks for watching.